Hello and welcome to the Thoreau Society's webinar weekend in featured films. There is more day to dawn, a global conversation celebrating Thoreau's lasting legacy, sponsored by the Thoreau Society. Events will be taking place beginning today at noon and run through tomorrow. There are two featured films that you'll enjoy watching, one by the Penobscot Nation and the other by Huey, Surveyor of the Soul. If you go to thoreausociety.org and look at the webinar page under events, you'll have a full view of our upcoming program. So it gives me pleasure to introduce today's panel, The Global Thoreau Community, a Conversation, Part 1, sponsored by the Thoreau Society with interviewer Jane Gordon and guest speakers Mark Thoreau from the UK, Shinji from Japan, Nikita Pokrovsky from Russia, and Francois Speck from France. Jane is a member of the Thoreau Society Board of Directors. She has worked decades as a public historian, educator, administrator, and consultant at numerous historical organizations and literary sites. She recently directed 2 National Endowment for the Humanities workshops for teachers from across the nation on Thoreau and Concord. She lives in Damariscotta, Maine. Mark Thoreau is distant cousin of Henry on his father's side. He's interested in family history and enjoys researching the Thoreau family line. Naturally, this connection has led him to an interest in Henry David Thoreau. Mark has been a member of the Thoreau Society for 30 years. Shinji is a professor at the Shirei University, Tokyo, and currently visiting scholar at Stanford, 2019 through 20. His publications include the memorable quotation of Henry David Thoreau, translated 2009, and Toxic Discourse and the Creation of the Myth of Land in the Writings of Terry Tempest Williams. Themes of Environmental Humanities, 2017, which he edited as well. Dr. Nikita Pokrovsky, professor and head of Department of General Sociology, National Research University Higher School of Economics, Moscow, Russia. Nikita is a Thoreau Society Life member beginning in 1978, leading Thoreau scholar in Russia, builder of the replica of Thoreau's Walden Pond cabin in the north of Russia. Francois Speck is professor of American literature and culture at École Normale in Lyon, France, and researcher affiliated with the IHRIM in the Central National. He has published numerous critical essays and co-edited 2 collections of essays on Thoreau, Thoreauvian Modernities and Thoreau Beyond Borders by University of Massachusetts Press. So without further ado, I will turn the meeting or the webinar over to Jane Gordon, and I will go off screen until we come back for the question and answer session. And I do invite all of our viewers today to submit their questions for our panelists via chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, and hi everybody out there in Thoreau world, wherever you are. I'm delighted you're all here with us, and I suspect we're living at some kind of crossroads right now, or maybe a kind of a crack in time, where our usual world is pretty much being shaken up, and our assumptions, our attitudes, our activities have all been interrupted. Many of them turned upside down the last 3 months. I think you all know what I mean. Poisons in our society are being exposed. We're examining ourselves as we probably never have before, and our systems. and we're questioning everything, probably more than any time in most of our lifetimes. Henry Thoreau, I think, was the ultimate questioner. His probing, his penetrating investigations of the world around him and the world within him are, to me, and I suspect to many of you, watching this, really an inspiration and a call to both reflection and action. And here we have this wonderful fact that the Thoreau Society, as Mike said, is truly a global community. We, I think, undoubtedly over the spring have all spent a good deal of time talking with our family, with our friends, our neighbors. I spent a lot of time talking to myself and my cats, and to the television and my computer screen, but we can broaden that circle and I think really enrich our conversation with the perspectives of our four guests who might just introduce today. What are they noticing where they are? What is life now for them, where they're living? What is it like for them? What are they wondering about in this scary, strange, turbulent, tumultuous, troubled time, this crossroads, this uncharted territory of 2020? So I'd like for us to look at actually three areas in our conversation, the three S's: surroundings, self, and society. And I want to start with surroundings. Thoreau wrote in his journal in August of 1851, something that's been a real consolation and a guide for me. This was a year when I had planned to travel to 7 other countries. I'm supposed to be in Stockholm right now. Obviously not happening. My range has been restricted to a very small dot of the mid-coast of Maine. But this is what Thoreau wrote, and it, to me, addresses this beautifully. A man must generally get away hundreds or thousands of miles from home before he can be said to begin his travels. Why not begin his travels at home? Would he have to go very far or look very closely to discover new novelties? So taking that in mind, in this period of needing to stay either at or nearby our homes, being literally and figuratively grounded, what have you been doing to explore your surroundings? I'm going to ask all 4 of our guests here. And what, as Thoreau said, what new novelties have you discovered in the place where you're living? So let me start with Francois, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I would like to say that the period, as far as I'm concerned, has been one of increased sensitivity to my immediate environment. It's not that I was previously unaware of my surroundings, far from that, but that has really been a new stage. And I'm fortunate enough to live very close to public lands that are designated area. I mean, an area of outstanding ecological value. And so despite lockdown, I was able to go there every day and have a very close equivalent of what Thoreau experienced in his time as he walked around Concord. And so I go there very often, but in these times of strongly restricted movement, although restrictions have eased and are virtually over by now, this became one of the few opportunities or reasons for leaving home. And so for the first time since I started living here, and it's an environment, I would like to have to show a picture of the, you will see that it pretty much looks like, can you see the image here? It looks quite a bit like Walden Pond in a way, and so it really looks familiar. And so this time I was able to be witness to the unfolding of life in the woods as I visited them every day and observed them quite intensely. I'm almost tempted to say I scrutinized them in a way. And so you can see a couple of images here just to give you an idea. So for instance, this image of a green woodpecker I don't know if there's anything equivalent in the US, but there's probably some kind of equivalent species of woodpecker. And then picture of black woodpecker, which is slightly more difficult to see here. And so these are just a few examples of what I was able to see, and what I call the unfolding of life. And this definitely emphasized the uniqueness of each day. Although I do not have a routine day, generally speaking, I was really struck by how different the atmosphere and feel of the forest was each time I went. So I would say that the woods became so quiet that a very different perception, both of time and space, prevailed. And I was soon aware that this was a unique historic opportunity, the experience of a lifetime, I should say.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And as Mike mentioned before, as you have thoughts or questions as any of our guests are speaking, be sure to put them down in the chat. And Mike is going to be monitoring that, and during our time at the end when we take some of those questions, we'll have those. Thank you. Nikita, where are you now? Tell us a little bit about where you are and what you've been exploring.
I'm staying here, not far from Moscow, which is about 60 kilometers northwest of Moscow, in a countryside, in our family country home. And this is for the first time in my entire life experience that I'm deprived of my inalienable right to move anywhere but where I'm staying. Okay, so I'm living in a full solitude, and I'm not even meeting my neighbors. I don't meet them at all. I just have my family with me, and that is wonderful. And so for my surrounding today and over the last 3 months was the surrounding of my own self, the surrounding of my inward exploration of what I'm so can find a landscape of my own self. So it's a wonderful philosophical experience, which doesn't go parallel to anything else in my life. I tell you the truth. So what I found out actually in this surrounding, inward surrounding, was that for the first time in my life, I felt that I'm still feeling this, that I'm not only a human being, but I'm a biological being. So I'm a biology species. I feel that I'm not very much different from a mosquito. I kill mosquitoes many times during the day because there is plenty of them. But at the same time, the virus can kill me as a biological being any moment without even warning me. So in this sense, following Thoreau, I think, and this is my own interpretation of Thoreau, we are not only human beings, but we are part of nature. We are natural beings. And this is very important for me. This is, I'm saying, this is a discovery of my own self, and to feel yourself really as a part of nature. It's not mental, it's biological feeling. It's a sense of nature, actually. And this is very important because I'm a sociologist by training and by my current occupation. I'm teaching sociology. And sociology talks all the time about society, which is very important, which is probably the ultimate reality in the world, not biology, but society. But today, as a sociologist, I should admit fully that we are not only social, but we are also biological, because I'm saying this again, a virus can kill you, anytime. You don't know where it is coming from. We don't see the virus. It's everywhere, or it's nowhere. It's every moment can you expect the virus to get you. So in this sense, it is important to to realize that your unity with nature, and it's important to revise your own social self and to reduce it to your biological self. This is probably what is important for me, and this is the surrounding. This is my mental surrounding today. Oh, this is what I'm about.
It's really a profound understanding, and I want to explore as we go along that whole, what you called that landscape of our own selves. That's such an important understanding, and something that I guess we're all being kind of forced to slow down and stop running and spend a little bit more time thinking about these things. Thank you for connecting us with that idea, because it is really pretty earth-shattering when you think about it, isn't it? Shinji, you are not at home in Japan. I know you're visiting as a visiting professor at Mountain View. So what's going on in Mountain View? And you can also talk about you know, what you're discovering in terms of your new surroundings.
I'm originally from Japan. My hometown is near Hiroshima, but now I live in Palo Alto Mountain View border in Northern California. Because of the shelter-in-place order, Stanford closed its campus, and to go outside is limited to go shopping for groceries and walking nearby. It's as if I'm a prisoner in paradise. When I go for a walk almost every day to keep my health, and now, thanks to shelter-in-place order, I learned almost every street like a mailman. At the same time, what I rediscovered is that the wild is here in my place, and not necessarily to go all the way to Yosemite or Alaska. As Thoreau says, the West of which I speak is but another name for the wild is very real to me now. Yeah, that's it.
And it is interesting. I was thinking where Thoreau talks about in Life Without Principle that people feel like they have to go off to, you know, to find gold in California and Australia and other places, and it's right there, very often right under their feet where they are, and it looks different than that yellow gold, but it's right there. Thank you. And Mark, what about you? You're in England as our representative of life in the UK here in our Thoreau community. What's happening there? What are you exploring?
So I live in the United Kingdom, obviously. I live in a town, or just outside a town called Horsham, which is in Sussex, so the south of the country. Yeah, I mean, I suppose like the others, obviously we were locked down for about 7 weeks. We're sort of coming out of that now. Our exercise was limited to an hour a day going out. So obviously those long walks did have a limit to them, and those cycles did as well. But making the most of it, really. Near to where I live, I'm very fortunate. There is a country park which has a small lake, not as big as Walden Pond, I have to say, but probably my equivalent of Walden Pond, if you like, and very picturesque, and you know, lovely walks and that sort of stuff, and you know, seeing the swans and their cygnets. So that's amazing when you go for a walk and see that, and parallel and almost in the same as Henry's scenario, really. Alongside that country park is a railway line, funnily enough, a disused railway line. So in the 60s, a lot of railway lines in the UK were taken up and just got rid of. There was just too many of them. And they've been turned into country walks and sort of cycling routes, etc., etc. And it's great, really, because it's amazing. It goes straight away through the country, and it's just, you know, they go on for miles and miles and miles. I think this one's probably about 30 miles long. I haven't walked all the way to the end, I have to say, but have walked and cycled down that many a time, and seeing the deer and all the different things that you probably wouldn't pay attention to normally. It is absolutely amazing. And obviously keeping fit, because obviously all those walks and cycling really, you know, helps one to lose weight and keep fit and stop you from sort of staying at home and stirring and sort of not doing really much at all. So for me, and gardening as well, getting out into the garden and doing things that, I've got to say my garden's never looked as amazing as it does currently, and, spending just time sort of getting back to basics really. And sort of in the UK, there's a lot of the sort of basic skills are really sort of being tested. People are cooking now, people are baking. We had a shortage of eggs. You couldn't get flour. You can only buy flour in great big catering bags, and people were buying that sort of stuff and baking the most fantastic cakes. I've got to say I didn't do that, but so there's lots of people going back to sort of, I suppose, their core values and what they we used to do years and years ago. For me as well, sort of bit of clearing the house and getting stuff, getting rid of clutter and all those things that are around you. And obviously Henry has very strong views on possessions and all that sort of stuff, and going back to getting rid of the clutter from one's life and so for me, I mean, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. We're probably hopefully never going to experience anything quite like this again, but an opportunity to do things for me, for family history, for all my study and things like that. I've spent huge amounts of times doing that on the days when I couldn't get in the garden. So yes, it's been a very interesting experience, and one for me probably would have been nicer to go on for another month or two from a being at home perspective, not from all the disasters that have been caused for it. But yes, so for me, very interesting and very spiritual experience.
And I suspect, I'm nodding along as you're talking, I suspect so many people have experiences that are quite similar to what everything from the rails to trails, which we have here in the US, the conversion of those old railroad lines, to the bakery aisles in the markets being completely bare because everybody is baking from scratch. What I'd like to do now is go back to basically something that Nikita touched on, as I mentioned before, in his landscape of self, and look at the second S, which is that whole idea of exploring self. And I'd like to share again something that Henry Thoreau wrote from Life Without Principle. And he says, "Let us consider the way in which we spend our lives." Let me just repeat that. Let us consider the way in which we spend our lives. And Nikita, you already mentioned that whole change in sort of understanding of yourself as a societal being, which you already had, but also understanding yourself as a biological being and a different set of connections. And I'd like to ask all four of you, in this period of relative solitude, have you had a chance to spend time reflecting on your life and lifestyles? You obviously have, and reflecting on life in general. And what changes as a result of this when things start to return to whatever they're going to return to? What changes would you like to make in your life? And what are going to be the biggest challenges to making those changes happen? And also, what guidance could you share from us from Thoreau's writings? Nikita, could I start with you again, if you don't mind, since you got us going on?
Sure. I have some, let's say, philosophical ideas and some very practical ideas. The first thesis, just a very short one, which I would like to discuss, is that, first of all, the idea of simplification is very important. In order to make your own inward space or cosmos inside you, first of all, you need to rid off of the material things which you don't need for anything. So first of all, this is the idea of simplifying or simplification of your life. So first of all, what I did in practical sense, we started to throw away some garbage which we don't need, and to make room for something like our life without commodities which we don't need. So this is a very important thing, to get a release from superfluous stuff in your life, including some material stuff. So the more simple you are, the more liberated you are from the material, let's say, material dimension of life. Then the question is, how far can you go in this process of simplification? What are the limits of simplification? And this is a very interesting discussion probably for our next meeting in Concord. How far can we move on the road to simplifying oneself? What we practically don't need to use. Do you need a bread maker? We need a bread here. And it's not really good to go to a store to buy something because, again, of the danger of virus. So in this sense, we use a bread maker. Do you need a microwave? Probably yes, probably no. You can get along without a microwave in some instances, but in some other instances you need it, and so on and so forth. So this is a very nice thing to make an inventory of your own house and also of your own self, So this is the idea of simplifying. And just to make a long story short, I would say that another important thing was that I realized so well that the life after the city, life outside the city, life without touching the city is so good, It has been a long, let's say, philosophical contemplation of mine just to think of life after the city. So now I'm more convinced in what I'm thinking than ever before. But another question is, however, we have another question. Life after the city is life without commodities. It's life close to earth. It's like an archaic way of supporting your own life or making your own living to the close to what Thoreau did at Walden Pond. Or it's more or less modern life with all the commodities, or some of the commodities, internet, for example, internet or cellular phones, but outside the city. And what's the difference between two things? About two ways. What is the coordination between them? Either we should be just very simple people and go all the way back in the history and becoming very simple. Or we should be modern people, but with the idea of simplification in our minds. So this is interesting, and that's what I was thinking about all the time. Did you follow me?
You've given us some various, sort of ways or pathways to think about that, of combinations of where we can live and what we can use to make living in a more dispersed area something that would work for a lot of people, yet at the same time being able to unload so many of the things that we may not need. Thank you. Francois, you're living, I know you teach in Lyon. You're out, you were talking about the public lands and all. Are you in a more rural area now? And more to the point, what have you been thinking about your life and lifestyle? And
well, I think that in the first place, I'd like to point out that as an academic, the change was probably not as big as it was for a majority of people, because there's an important part of our work that is done at home or from home, in as much isolation as we can get. And so to that extent, that's something that was not that different for us. But of course, this inevitably made us reflect on a number of things, and in my case in particular, more than ever realized the relevance and depth of Thoreau's remark that the cost of a thing is the amount of what I would call life, which is required to be exchanged for it, immediately or in the long run. That is to say, the true value of something is determined by the amount of life you need to give away in your efforts to acquire that thing and maintain your mode of living. And Thoreau called for a redefined balance between work and leisure. And this is one of the things that the COVID crisis has done, I think. Thoreau made clear leisure is a necessary component of a renewed relation to one's environment. And the question is not to stop working altogether, of course, and Thoreau himself did work, but being able to save some time creates new opportunities for self-culture, to use a 19th century term. And for instance, driving to where you work deprives you of the time that might be employed to relate to and to enjoy your surroundings in a more sustained way. And in a way, the amount of time I was able to spend in the woods corresponded to the amount of time I wasn't on the road or in a train. And significantly, driving also contributes to diminishing the quality and value of our environment. And that is certainly a point where the personal and the collective are intricately interconnected. And so, put differently, what I'm suggesting is that the current crisis has brought into relief the question of cost and value understood in the Thoreauvian sense. The idea, if you like, that producing economic value comes at a price, that it has a personal, cultural, and environmental cost. I'd like to think that this idea of the multiple costs inherent in the creation and acquisition of value, that this idea is fairly easy to understand, and that it can appeal to a wide range of people and thus spark change toward a more environmentally friendly society. This is my utopia, perhaps.
Yeah, and your Arcadia, you're giving us a lot to think about. My head is spinning, and it should be, and I'm glad of it. I'm glad of it. Mark, what about you? What kinds of things have you been contemplating on your lifestyle now that you've become a master baker? And
I don't know about the baker. Yeah, so I suppose one of the quotes for me from Henry is the quote, "A man is rich in proportion to the number of things that he can afford to let alone," which I think is really relevant today. I think that it questions, our reliance on technology for the good or the bad. So what we should have and what we shouldn't have, as we discussed earlier. So for me, I have hardly used my car, which is great. So therefore I'm walking to places more because I don't need to use it. However, prior to the lockdown, I didn't know what Zoom was. I had never been on a Zoom call before. I had used FaceTime and now I'm FaceTiming friends and family more often. So therefore we've got the technology for the bad and the environment. So we know that aircraft are grounded, and certainly I've only seen 2 in the skies in the last 2 months, which is amazing. We know how sort of the carbon footprint has been reduced because of what's going on, and there's lots of benefits to that as well, and the damage that technology has caused for us. But there is the positives, I think, around sort of the devices and FaceTime chats, and rather than picking up the phone to someone, you can actually have a proper conversation with them and interact with them in a better way. So I think for me, carrying that on afterwards, I think would be amazing. I think the keeping fit element of it, why go in a car, why not cycle, why not walk, which all obviously goes into health and making you feel better. I think there's lots of dangers that may end. I mean, we're very lucky that it's certainly in the UK that during this period that this has happened, it's been great weather. So people are happy to go and walk instead of drive. People are happy to get cycle. But, when we talk of maybe even 5 or 6 months time, when the weather is completely different, well, we just go back to our own ways of doing things. So I think it does make you question what's important. I think I'd go back to the how good I felt removing most clutter from my life and just taking, and I had a real sweep of the house and got rid of loads and loads of stuff, and how it made me feel. And I just felt that I felt in such a better place just for getting rid of it and not being reliant on it. So I think there's lots for, sort of say, as I said earlier, once in a lifetime opportunity. And, for me, I had a plan of what I was going to do every single day and achieved it. So for me, it was making the best of a bad situation and turning it into a positive, really.
Yeah, that's a great way of summing it up, isn't it? And Shinji, what about you? What things have you been thinking about in terms of your life and your lifestyle, the way you spend your life, as Thoreau said? You can unmute yourself there. Shinji, you just need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Well, as I said, I started daily walking after shelter-in-place order. Well, staying at home all day, I become restless and sometimes emotional. A good example of it is that actually I had a big quarrel with my wife yesterday. And at the same time, you know, every day when I watch TV, the news covers sad incidents in the United States and all over the world. Um, um, well, easy to be emotional in many ways these days, but when I go for a walk, solitude calms my mind and my balance returns. Walking is like, well, in a sense, Zen meditation. Thoreau said he needs 4 hours walking. The length of Thoreau's walking could tell us that, well, maybe Thoreau must have so many things that made him emotional, such as slavery in those days. Yeah, that's what I reflected these days.
And actually, that's a perfect bridge to what I wanted to have us look at, as you were mentioning, for you and for most of us, and for Thoreau. Walking in solitude calms his mind, calms our minds, but yet there are things that are so disturbing as they were to him. If you look at his journals in 1851 or 1854 and so on, if we look at what's going on right now, even at the time that we were putting together this this little panel, you know, events happened that were profoundly disturbing. And of course, Thoreau confronts us with questions about our moral duty to act in the face of injustice, about our relationships to government and other people and our own consciences, and basically our responsibilities as ethical members of society and stewards of Earth. So we can look right now at how people are responding to the questions that Thoreau asked, that I think we all ask when we become aware of something that is terribly wrong. What can I do? What actions can I take? And that's whether we're talking about systemic racism or the pandemic or income inequality or the climate crisis or gross failures of leadership or some other catastrophe. Thoreau says, in slavery in Massachusetts, we have used up all our inherited freedom. If we would save our lives, we must fight for them. If we would save our lives, we must fight for them. And gentlemen, for our final question, just considering the events of the last 3 months, what can we as principled individuals do to save and fight for our collective lives so that we can breathe, as we see in all of those signs? I can't breathe. How can we help people to breathe? How can we each individually determine what we can do to contribute to making the world a better place? And how can Thoreau's ideas and questions be helpful in this aspect? Shinji, would you mind going first this time? Can unmute yourself again. Thanks.
Sure. Well, I myself is reluctant to yell protest chants in front of the White House or Tiananmen. However, Thoreau says, rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth. I just simply would like to share the bare facts of what is happening in Asia, where I'm from, and let our imaginations belong to the open space of democracy. Well, according to New York Times, just a week ago in Japan, Shigeru Yokota, whose daughter Megumi was kidnapped by North Korea in 1977, died. He had been waiting for seeing his daughter for 43 years, but in vain. North Korea released 5 from 17 abductees in 2002, but his daughter was not included among them. At the same time, The Guardian reported that, well, Zoom shut down the video conferences on Hong Kong and Tiananmen. I think video conference was aiming at commemorating the anniversary of Tiananmen incident. Yeah, that's what I read from the news. Without democracy, it is always the citizens, ordinary people, especially children, who get victimized. It's sad.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Francois, what about you? Any thoughts on what we can each do to help us collectively breathe again?
Well, I think that if anything, the COVID pandemic has brought into sharp relief not only our interconnectedness on the local, national, or global level, but what can be described as our shared or perhaps intersecting responsibility. And one of Thoreau's most appealing and powerful statements, in my view, is the idea that what primarily matters is not the ballot you drop into the ballot box once a year, but the kind of man you drop into the street every morning. It's in slavery in Massachusetts. And indeed, in Thoreau's time, there was a raging debate between proponents of moral suasion and advocates of political action. Thoreau did not believe in the latter and thought that the root of any societal change was the individual. This may have sounded naive to some, as it does today, but I think the political situation of antebellum America was so confused, at least as much as ours today, that it also made sense. No one could claim to have any definitive key to solving the contradictions of the time. And Thoreau claimed in such a context, it is crucial for the individual to stick to a daily ethical commitment. In other words, he believed in the primacy of the ethical over the political. And what he meant by this is the continuing importance of thinking about our personal actions, what we choose to do at any time, and never losing sight of that. And this, of course, may sound like a tepid commitment, perhaps, or a policy of small steps, but I think it is a crucial step, especially in the midst of political confusion, which may actually be an inherent condition of any society. But in other words, Thoreau powerfully suggested we should never lose sight of our individual responsibility, whatever the course of political action may be in its own respect.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nikita?
Yes, thank you. Well, let me say something. I have an intuition that the concept of civil disobedience is not outdated at all. It's not a historical fact or historical concept. It is something which may be used in the future for achieving certain social and political goals in different parts of the world. The world today is very unstable from my perspective, as I can see it, very unstable in terms of political instability, in terms of economic instability, and in many other ways. So the concept which was so vital of Thoreau in his own time, and also the concept of civil disobedience, which was advocated by Leo Tolstoy, of course, and who became, as you probably remember, one of the most important followers of Henry Thoreau in his, Leo Tolstoy's time. This is very important for Russia, and especially under the certain tendencies in the development of the political situation in my country. So let me not go further into discussing the details, but in principle, I'm discussing the reality. In this sense, and this is another idea of mine, in this sense, the idea of solitude and the idea of the escape from the city, the idea does not contradict the idea of civil disobedience. You cannot run away from the society or from the city without coming back and solving or resolving certain issues in the society. So in this sense, you are both, you're a hermit in your natural home, wherever it is, and at the same time, you're responsible for what is happening in the society in terms of your personal attitude towards the events and the tendencies in the society, with the possibility of your using the power of civil disobedience as the manifestation of the will of people and masses of people in certain designated circumstances. This is what I think about the combination of both, of civil disobedience and life after the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And that combination of the solitude and the social consciousness and that time for reflection and time for action is key. And Mike, just before we go to the questions, I want to give the last word to a member of the Thoreau family, and that would be Mark, and that to give him a chance to answer that final question, and then we'll just turn it right back to you. Is that all right?
Excellent,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah. So I suppose the UK, the racism bit is really been has really come to light. I think that you know, it's very difficult with our history. Obviously, it goes back such a long way, and obviously we had a big part of that. And it seems to have turned in the UK towards statues of people, and that seems to be where we're looking at quite a lot in the news at the moment, especially the last sort of week or so. So I think last Saturday, a statue of Edward Colston, who was a slave trader, was pulled down and thrown into the harbour. You know, now the whole town had places named after him. It was a big thing, and of course other statues are now, including Winston Churchill, actually have been defaced, and back this weekend they've been covered up. So that it does ask a lot of questions for us. Obviously, most people do agree with it. Of course they do. I think the only concern that a lot of people have is that, you know, we're in this time of social distancing, 2 meter rule, and staying away from people. Yet we've got these mass gatherings going on around the country, which, of course, while you know the cause that they're fighting for is absolutely right, and you know, as Henry said, let your life be the counter friction to the machine. So absolutely, that's really important. But of course, you've also got a pandemic on the back of this as well, which we need to be really careful of, and it's very difficult, I think, to get that right balance. To be able to demonstrate, and to be fair, the government have allowed demonstrations today up until 5 o'clock. I don't know how they will pan out, but as I say, statues and the history of the UK obviously is going to be really part of this debate going forward.
Thank you. And I should just mention before Mike does the next part with the chat, that this is really a two-part conversation these 2 days. Rebecca Neal Gould will be facilitating the conversation that will be tomorrow at the same time at 12 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. And that panel, again, with international, will be looking exactly what you just mentioned, Mark, that and every one of you mentioned, that balance that's needed between self and society, between reflection and action. So I hope you'll all have an opportunity to tune in and hear the second part of the conversation with 4 new perspectives tomorrow. So Mike, I think we're all set. If you want to share with us some of the questions that came up through chat, we're
Sure. So one of the first questions we had today came from Karen McLean from Canada, and she says, Nikita, I'm curious as to how well known Thoreau is in Russia. How did you become interested in him and the other transcendentalists?
Um, I would say, good question, by the way. Thoreau today is much more known today in Russia than it used to be known, let's say 30 years ago or 40 years ago. So his books are available in Russia in different editions. He is read by younger people, maybe not to the extent I wish he could be read, but nevertheless, he's a very well-known person. And if you ask somebody in the street, for example, what they know about Thoreau and Walden Pond, I would say in 50% of cases out of 100, you will get the answer, a correct answer.
Thank you, Nikita.
Yeah, thank you.
The next question comes from Dennis Nosen, and he asks Francois, does the freedom of the birds, your woodpeckers, frustrate you in these constrained times, or remind you of your freedom to move alone, walking along, or bicycling at the pond and in Lyon?
Well, yeah, thanks, Dennis, for this wonderful question. Of course, this definitely came to me. I mean, it felt like they were completely living outside any concern, and of course, they had concerns of their own, and they were threatened by other birds, for instance. I was able to observe different forms of predation, for instance, raptors, but it's true that they seem to be living in an entirely different world, and in a way, perhaps I did envy them. You're right. I mean, they were free to move wherever they wanted to move, or so it seems. And so, yeah, thank you for pointing this out. So.
Thanks, Francois. So we have another question, this one directed to Shinji from Michael Schleifer. Shinji, your circumstances reminded me of the African story, Acres of Diamonds, the moral of which, we all have acres of diamonds surrounding us, if only we look. Are you familiar with this parable? Does the freedom of the birds, your woodpeckers, but that got into the next question.
Well, I am not I'm not familiar with this story, but well, that reminds me of some other story that sounds familiar, but not directly. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, no straight answer hit upon my mind right now.
Okay, well, I think we can conclude this is an open question to all of our panelists, but I think we should start with Mark Thoreau. And the question was posed by Tom McCone. How well is Thoreau known in your countries? In what ways has he influenced people there?
Gosh, okay. So in the UK, probably not so well known. I mean, Walden was first published here in the 1880s, I think it was. I think 1886 from memory. And if you go to a bookshop, you will find Walden, Civil Disobedience. Probably that would really be about it in the classic section, to be honest with you. For me, I don't sort of get that many people that would recognise the name, but probably in my life, probably 5 or 6 people said, "Oh, are you any relation to blah blah blah?" And that does come up. But he's probably, I would say, if I was looking in percentage terms, the same as Nikita was talking, I would probably go down to sort of around about 5 to 10%. So nowhere near as much as in Russia, and certainly not nowhere near as the US.
Well,
Shinji, would you like to respond next? Hmm. Shinji's muted, and there you go.
Oh, sorry. You know, something wrong with my PC, and I couldn't hear your question. So could you repeat it again?
Oh, the question is, how well known is Thoreau in your country? So in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Well, Thoreau is quite popular among us Japanese, but unfortunately, among young people, well, they do not read books. So, well, honestly speaking, if I ask students, do you know Thoreau? Maybe just a few. So yeah, we Thoreauians should think about how we share the thoughts and ideas of Henry W. Thoreau in Japan.
Thank you. Francois?
Well, Thoreau is fairly well known here. It's not exactly a household name yet, but it's fairly well known. His name often comes up in newspaper articles in particular. And it used to be in connection to the idea of civil disobedience, but more recently has more to do with degrowth. I mean, with Thoreau's critique of economic growth, or what we can assume would have been his critique of the current economic growth. That's what I would say. And all of his works are easily available in different editions. So yeah, it's comparatively well known.
Thanks, Francois. Nikita?
Well, actually, I have already answered this question before. However, I have a practical proposal to share with you. In my personal experience, I just noticed that going from building with your own hands the Thoreau cabin to reading his books. This is the way for learning more and more about Thoreau and his heritage in the future. So in this sense, let me share with you another personal, let's say, secret, so to say. I would like to start a campaign in Russia for building Thoreau cabins in this country. And this, in my view, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but it may be the best way to disseminate the ideas of Thoreau through practical carpentry and constructing with your own hands his cabin. It's very simple. It's easy to do, or more or less, I would say. And then you start reading his books when you in the cabin, being in the cabin. It makes a perfect combination of something material and something very spiritual.
I love
Nikita.
that idea. Deconstruction through construction. Perfect.
Right. That's perfect. Nikita, you had once written an article that Tolstoy actually had a cabin at Yasnaya Polina that he referred to as Walden. Could you say a little bit about that?
Well, it is still there, by the way. You can visit this, so to say, Thoreau cabin anytime. So actually, it's not a replica of Thoreau cabin. This is a small log house used for peasants who came to his house to be medically treated with medical problems. So they were put in this cabin, and this was called the cabin in the orchard, or Thoreau cabin. So it's both. It's very humanistic, I would say, a place for people who could not afford regular medical care, but Tolstoy wanted to help them, and he put them in this cabin. It is still there.
Thank you. So concluding today's webinar, Jean, would you like to add anything before I begin the closing remarks?
No, I just want to thank all of the panelists. You've been wonderful and just given, I hope, all of us so much to think about. I'm looking at some of the comments on the chat and just all of us thinking and thinking and thinking, and that's what it's all about, thinking and looking for the truth. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd just like to thank today's panelists for joining us. I think it was a great session, and for upcoming sessions for the rest of the afternoon, you can join us again at 2 p.m. for our session on What Would Thoreau Do?, sponsored by the Thoreau Farm. And if I hadn't mentioned earlier, I am sitting here at Thoreau Farm in the birth room. And at 4 o'clock this afternoon, we have the opportunity to be joined by Henry Petrosky, the author of The Pencil, who was our keynote speaker, or was slated to be our keynote speaker in 2019, but was unable to join us. He is able to join us today for the webinar, and he'll be interviewed by Richard Smith. And then this evening, I hope you all have an opportunity to watch the film, The Penobscot. It was put together specifically for our webinars. It's a well done 1 hour and 7-minute documentary. And after you watch the film, you can come back and join us this evening at 8 o'clock when we'll be joined by the Penobscot Nation to have a Q&A on that film. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again at 2.
Thank you. Thank you.